My name's Jenny West, and today I'm going to be giving a video presentation for my organizational behavior class 3350, and it's going to be over Cleopatra's leadership style. So Cleopatra is a symbol of beauty and seduction. She used all of her capabilities to become a successful leader in a time where men were dominant dictators. And though she may have used some unethical tactics, like choosing to seduce men of power, she did what she had to do, and she was willing to die for her cause. She ruled Egypt for 21 years up until 30 BC. And there were actually 7 other Cleopatras, her being the 7th, but she rose up and became the most well-known of them all. And she's one of the most popular queens and the last pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra was a very intelligent and wise leader. She studied many subjects, and she even spoke 6 different languages. Not much is known about Cleopatra's early life. Her mother's unknown. She was born in 70 BC, and she became ruler of Egypt at 18, alongside her 2 younger brothers, but while trying to take over Egypt to become the sole ruler, she was exiled by her brother and his advisors. So she quickly began using her beauty and her seduction as a tool for gaining power. An effective leader must have appropriate cognitive skills. So Cleopatra showed her problem-solving skills, and she devised an army and a plan to win back her dynasty. And Cleopatra seduced and allied with Julius Caesar, and they were both quite unpopular rulers at the time. But nevertheless, they managed to conquer Egypt. However, she wanted her position as ruler to be secure, and she always had an agenda. So she soon gave birth to Caesar's son, and he was crowned co-regent at age 5, and this reassured Cleopatra's rule. So it's become quite clear that Cleopatra had a charismatic leadership style. She used her charm and her emotion to gain leadership. Her beauty was not as extraordinary, it is said, as her presence, and that was supposedly quite enchanting. She firmly identified herself with the goddess Isis, who was also very well known for her beauty and charm. And like Cleopatra, this goddess Isis lacked approval at first, but then became one of the most important goddesses of ancient Egypt. And this association that Cleopatra made with Isis only added to her charismatic style. And she was even known to her people as New Isis. After her husband Julius Caesar was murdered, Cleopatra had to use her charms again. As the Nile River's flooding and crops were ruined, her people were left hungry, starving. But she planned to save her dynasty and remain in power once more with seduction. She sailed in an impressive ship and wore fine robes of the goddess Isis, and she managed to seduce another leader of Rome, Mark Antony, and he was already married at the time. So he left his wife and children in Rome, and he followed Cleopatra back to aid Egypt. And she eventually gave birth to a set of twins, and later a son fathered by Antony. So Cleopatra was highly power-hungry, which is eventually what led to her demise. She had Antony completely under her control, and she made an enemy out of Rome after her son that she had with Caesar. Antony chose to name the next leader of Rome, basically, and that was supposed to be Octavian, his adopted son's he was supposed to be the rightful heir. So Antony kind of went against Octavian, and Octavian decided that he was going to go after Cleopatra, who had this hold on Antony. So Octavian's forces overpowered Egypt, and after this, Cleopatra and Antony were separated. They had gotten separated, and Antony heard the rumor that Cleopatra had killed herself and fell on his sword because he did not feel like he could go on living life without her. So while he's bleeding out, he finds out that she, in fact, was still alive. Um, and when she found out of his death, she truly mourned for him, it's said. But she herself didn't live much longer. She was supposed to be taken to Rome and be executed. And though her death is a little bit unclear, most people believe that, unable to face defeat, Cleopatra locked herself away with a venomous snake and ended her life. However, even in death, she was strategic, and she chose the asp snake, which is a symbol of divine royalty. However, if this is the true story of how she died, then her death from this snake bite was probably very slow and painful. And to this day, the tombs of Antony and Cleopatra have not been found. There's still just a lot of mystery behind her death. But Cleopatra loved Egypt, and she had a love and a need for power more, however. She wanted to gain as much power as possible. She was good at getting what she wanted, and she was effective in keeping a public image of being divine. I think that if she had remained in power, she would have tried to take over Rome and become the sole ruler. She was very devious and had a manipulative way about her. She made these alliances with leaders to prevent Rome from overtaking Egypt. Unfortunately, that immoral strategy that she had backfired. She made some powerful enemies, and though her charismatic leadership style strongly worked for 21 years, her ruling came to an end, and Egypt ended up becoming a province of Rome after all. But she knew just what to say and do to bewitch the men in her life. She was definitely a leader. Her association with this goddess Isis was also strategic, and it gave her more supremacy and authority to steadily gain loyalty. It's quite impressive how she captivated two Roman leaders into allying with her in a time when female rulers were hardly taken seriously. But she craved power, and I think what is more impressive, however, is the legacy and mystery that she left along with her death. She worked very hard her whole life to make sure that she was seen as divine and great, and mystical. I believe that her death was intended to make sure that her footprint was left on Egypt, and that it lived long after her dictate. Shakespeare even wrote a play about Cleopatra and Antony, and that was performed in 1603. And still to this day, there are plays and movies that depict the tragedy and the mystery behind Cleopatra's life and love. She was truly an effective leader. She continues to inspire women every day. Her greatest accomplishment was definitely being one of the first female rulers. Her technique of using seduction as a scheme stimulated many other rulers to think of marriage as nothing more than a way of becoming more powerful and secure. So many kings and queens have since made alliances similar to that of Cleopatra. She was definitely a woman ahead of her time. It is no doubt that she was an intelligent lady and she had a mission. Cleopatra had a clear vision of her rule, as most charismatic leaders do, and she anticipated that Rome would try and overtake Egypt, and that is why she made alliances out of their leaders. So charismatic leaders are masterful communicators. When she spoke, she was wise, she was intelligent, you believed what she was saying, and she fed Caesar and Antony just what they wanted to hear. She created a vision of a future that they could not deny. Antony was even willing to leave his kids and wife that he already had at home for her. The vital concern with charismatic leaders is that they are often evil charismatic. The decision on which category Cleopatra falls is up for debate. She's surrounded by so much legend that it is hard to characterize her true intentions. Cleopatra had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to stay pharaoh. She overcame personal and civic obstacles, but she was obviously a leader who craved power. But whether she truly carried Egypt above her own selfish selfish motives is a mystery left unsolved. But there is one thing: she was effective in getting what she wanted. She led a lot of people even after her death, a lot of females, and she was an effective leader. So that sums up my video presentation of Cleopatra's leadership style.